What's up, guys? We're back, and I'm back with my brother again to talk about the roster moves. Actually, hot off the press, this is probably one of the quickest videos I've gotten out for Tiger news this offseason. Hot
Mhm.
off the press, the Tigers have announced their non-tender roster candidates, and in last video, and my brother's in it. Say what up, Chris.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? How y'all doing? Finally able to get together and talk some Tigers baseball, baby. Big moves are about to happen here, hopefully in the next few weeks. But me and him were just talking about some moves that just happened. But I'll let him continue with that.
So in the last video, him and I had gone over all the potential non-tender candidates, and I would say we got it pretty wrong, huh?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just this is just shows like Scott Harris wants to start clean. He wants to start fresh. So, and I'm okay with it, honestly.
So before we get too deep into the thoughts of who we're most surprised about, let's talk about first about the contracts they did not tender for the 2023 season. The contracts for Miguel Diaz, and he was a reliever. He came up a few times out of AAA, mainly in the back end of the year when they were going through like when Matt Manning got hurt again and everything else. He wasn't. He was just a fringe bullpen arm. Miguel Diaz, Kyle Funkhauser. I am super surprised they didn't do Funkhauser. Uh, Michael Pepperzinski, I don't even know who that is. Jamer Candelario, Brendan Davis, Harold Castro, and Willie Castro. Out of all those names for non-tender candidates, which ones stick out to you the most?
Out of all those, for sure, Harold Castro is probably the biggest for me, considering he was probably the most consistent Tiger for us last year for a long time on the hitting part of it. Obviously, until Riley Green started to heat up a little bit there, even though he got in a scuffle. But Harold Castro was definitely probably the most consistent Tiger they had for the longest time. That one surprises me the most. Jamer Candelario doesn't surprise me at all that they cut him, not one bit.
How about
But
Funky?
Funky, yeah, Funky definitely surprised me because I thought after the season before he had Tommy John was pretty good. So, because I mean, you and I predicted that he could tender a contract, and it still could happen even if he's a free agent.
Well, it wouldn't really make much sense though because they didn't give him a contract to begin with. If they wanted to keep him, they were going to keep him. See, I thought
I'm
Funk.
I'm I'm just saying it could happen still.
Oh
You
yeah,
never
like
know.
if he wants to sign a minor league deal, like a non-major league roster contract, if he goes and test it. But like Funkhauser was really good back in 2021. Like he had really good stuff. He showed good promise. He was a part of that early makings of the bullpen turning around in 2021. Back like when Cisnero made a name for himself, and Funkhauser and Gregory Soto was there when he first started making a name for himself in 2021. So I'm really surprised they didn't tender Funkhauser because of the money. But I think a lot of it has to do with the depth they have in the pen now. Because you look at all the arms they have, it's not like they're losing a whole bunch. He wasn't there last year and they were good last year. I just think for the cost savings of it, I'm really surprised. But I think right now they're only at 38 men on the roster on the 40. So I think they're probably trying to save spots for potential additions down the line. For me, I'm most surprised by is Harold Castro. Now, Harold Castro on a good team, he's not an everyday player, let's be honest. Harold Castro to you and I was pretty much like in the early 2000 teens with Don Kelly, baby. You know, Kelly was mine and yours favorites. You can go back and watch her videos. We used to call him Long Don Kelly, Donnie Baseball, DK Brawler. We used to call him all sorts of stuff. But if you look at Harold Castro's numbers, he was amongst the team best in average. He had almost the most hits on the team. His OBP was one of the better ones. But let's be real here. He was the best player on a shit team.
Well, I want to give a shout out to our best buddy Steven because that was one of his favorite Tigers for the longest time, Mr. Don Kelly. But the problem is real quick to touch on Funkhauser again. You said like the cost could be too much. I mean, how much could a guy like that really cost you?
No, I'm saying like he wasn't that much for cost.
Oh,
That's why
okay.
I was
Sorry,
surprised.
I heard it wrong. But I think too that, like you said, there's so much flexibility in the bullpen. Doesn't really matter, but it still kind of surprises me. But I think the main thing is like there were too many Castros on the Tigers rosters last year, meaning like there wasn't like everyday players. So I'm not really surprised that this move was made, but as you and I both agree, Harold Castro is definitely the most surprising. But you just can't have your everyday roster consist of utility players like you had last year.
Yeah.
which is why I think they're moving on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because Harold really didn't bring any pop. His on base was not that good. He struck out a whole bunch. But the thing was with him is he could be a pesky at bat and he was good at putting the ball in play. He was like one of those guys that just was like a natural hitter. But the only thing was is that's really all he had. He really didn't have he wasn't tremendously good at first base. You could put him all over. But I have an autographed ball by Harold Castro that says Hitting Harold. I have a game used baseball bat by Harold Castro. I'm never getting rid of it because I loved Harold Castro. I appreciate him. Now, Willie, I'm not surprised about Willie not getting tendered a contract because he didn't have anywhere to play. He was a shitty outfielder. He was good at throwing runners out from the corners, but he's a shitty outfielder. He never was able to stick at shortstop because remember, they got Willie Castro from the Indians for the Leonys Martin trade. And Willie Castro and Eugenio Suarez were around at the same time, and the Tigers were wondering if one of those two guys is going to be the shortstop of the future. Obviously, Eugenio Suarez got dealt to Cincinnati. Willie never really became the hitter or the defensive person they thought, and he was moved everywhere. So I'm not really surprised about Willie Castro at all. Brendan Davis was they got him from the Cubs. He was a fringe AAA player. He only played a little bit up in the major leagues. He might be done. Jeimer Candelario, you and I had touched on that last time. There's really no surprise here, right?
If you think too, though, like he was the face of the Tigers for a little while there, up with Matthew Boyd. So those are really the only two notables for the longest time through the Avila rebuild. But I think it was just time to move on. 28 years old. Clearly Harris wants to kind of rebuild the structure of the roster anyway. So, and after his season last year, I mean, you can't really be surprised. I mean, that was one of the worst seasons I've ever seen him play since he's been a Tiger, by far.
Because he went from a guy that was good defensively, like he used to be able to get everything in front of him. How many balls did we see go through the 5-hole this year with Jeimer? And how many?
Look at that! Look at that play he made in Seattle with Turnbull's no hitter. Like he can get those like on the reg, like usually like that hard hit ball. So it was like over a hit like 103 miles an hour to him or whatever off like a one hopper. I mean, like he's able to make those plays, but this year he couldn't get it done with the bat or the glove. And I think when Harris took over, a lot of those players are just kind of fighting for their lives. That's a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. But I just feel as though like it's not surprising. He just didn't do enough even towards the end of that time to really show like he's part of the future here anymore, in my opinion.
If you look at Jeimer's career as a Tiger, he only really had ever 2 good years. And one of the years that he was good in was a 60-game season, which was 2020. Obviously, he was very good in 2021. But what we saw in 2021 leading the league in doubles, we never saw anything like that in 2022. His at-bat basis was terrible. There were so many times you'd see him go up there. It would be 3 pitches, fastball, curveball in the dirt, done. Breaking ball swung through because he was sitting on the fastball and he just couldn't make the adjustment, struck out. Easy rollovers, pop-ups, and then he would bring it to the field to him. How many double plays this year did he not make because he had bad throws to second base because he was in his head? How many air throws did he have to first? Jeimer, when he first came up, and even like in 2021, 2020, he used to get everything hit right at him. Jeimer at one time had a decent glove, and I had said this a lot on my channel over the last couple of years. I defended Jeimer, but after this year, it's not hard to go out and replace a guy that hit 210 that was a 60 or 70 OPS plus. You're 30% worse than the league. You're not even worth a tender because I think he would have made like $6 or $7 million. You're not worth $6 or $7 million if you're 30% worse than the league. And if Jonathan Schoop wasn't as good as he was defensively and wasn't making the kind of money he was making, he wouldn't be on the team right now either. And I think right now, if you look at these non-tender candidates that the Tigers didn't go ahead and re-sign, even getting rid of someone like Harold Castro or even Willie Castro, if this was Al Avila, these players would still be on this roster right now. And that just goes to show you that the mediocrity that Al Avila was willing to settle for because he was trying to make it seem like he was building this up and what he was doing was working for the rebuild. I think right now, Harris is trying to prove, even as the 25th, 26th man on the roster, he wants every roster spot to be of some sort of quality and not just some piece that you have to play because with all the injuries that the Tigers had this year, Harold Castro provided you every day at bats. He was consistent. But so you had no choice but to play him. I think Harris trying to turn around this culture is trying to show it doesn't matter if you're the 26th man on the roster or you're Miguel Cabrera 2012. every single player on this team is going to provide something, and every single player on this team is going to be some kind of positional depth. Unlike Avila, where he's settling for anyone. Like, look at how many shitty pitchers Avila signed trying to stick over the last 3 years. For everyone from Mike Fiers to Matt Moore. Remember Tyson Ross was a Tiger? I mean, it was just so much dog shit. So, not surprised about Jammer being tendered, but I am surprised about Harold because I think Harold, given an opportunity, could have been a decent 26th man. Not an everyday player, but a decent 26th man on the roster.
Don't forget about your boy Jordan Zimmerman. That was another great signing that you absolutely love.
Yeah,
I did like. I used to like Jordan Zimmerman with the Nationals though. I used to like watching him pitch. It was a completely different player though.
But then he signs Javi Baez and Erod, and Javi Baez has by far his worst year, and then Erod's gone for 2 months. So it was a total shit show. So let's go like this now to bring this, keep going. Here's actually every person on the Tigers 40-man roster right now. Left-handed pitchers is Tyler Alexander. They tendered him a contract. Eddie Rodriguez, Tarek Skubal, Gregory Soto, Joey Wentz. Right-handed pitchers, Bo Brisky, Jose Cisnero, Angel De Jesus, or Angel De Jesus. He was in Toledo and a bullpen arm. Alex Faedo, Jason Foley, Ronnie Garcia, Garrett Hill, Joe Jimenez, Alex Lang, Matt Manning, Casey Mize. Reese Olson got bumped up. That's a name to watch. He's on the 40-man. There's a chance he pitches in Detroit this year. Spencer Turnbull, Will Vest, Brendan White. Catchers is Hassan Rogers. So Rogers finally is activated. Infielders, Javier Baez, Miguel Cabrera. That's a very loose term of the word infielder because he's a DH. Cody Clemens, Andy Ibanez. I don't even know who this is. Was he a guy that the Tigers picked up off of waivers? Because Scott Harrison's been making weird waiver moves, like from like Texas and Tampa. They've been picking up some weird guys.
I don't think Ibanez was a part of that. No.
You don't think so? Okay.
No.
Ryan Kreidler, another one that got 40-manned. Andre Lipsius. Have you seen this kid?
Well, we're listening to The Road to Detroit, and Dan Hasty, he does nothing but talk highly of Lipsius and how good of a complete package player he could be. So I heard he draws some good walks. He draws a lot of walks. And he appears that he could hit for average, too. So that's all I've really heard about him.
He does talk about him quite a bit.
The Road to Detroit, he mainly focuses on Josh Crouch because he loves the name because he's a catcher.
Yeah.
with Lipsius. I've heard a little bit about Perez, Parker Meadows. I mean, Dan Hasty loves him some Parker Meadows.
So let me finish this. Wenzel Perez got 40-man. Scope. Zach Short. I am extremely surprised Zach Short, as crappy as he's been, got 40-man. Spencer Torkelson. Outfielders. Akil Baddoo. Kerry Carpenter. Some bum named Riley Green. This guy, Blybe Madreras, he got picked up off of waivers today. The Tigers just did that today. Some other scrub named Austin Meadows and Parker Meadows, the baby giraffe. So that's the Tigers 40-man right now. They currently have 2 open roster spots. So I'm extremely excited to see if Reese Olson gets a chance to pitch in Detroit this year. And I'm extremely excited to see if maybe Parker Meadows somehow squeaks his way up into Detroit sometime mid to late year this year.
I mean, it's possible. I think the most possible out of all those is probably Reese Olson. Parker Meadows, I don't know, because our pitching depth is still kind of at a low for now. So I think Reese Olson can get a chance, but it's going to be more exciting because you get to see him in spring, potentially. So I already said if they start in Toledo, I want to go down there and watch them play, especially Parker, because I'm a big fan of Austin. So.
Well, and a lot of these guys, you have to 40-man them because they're going into their 6th year.
Yeah, with the Rule 5 or whatever.
Rule 5, yeah. So most of those dudes, it's not a surprise that they had to get put on the 40-man. But this is also kind of when you're close to getting Rule 5 and you get put on the 40-man, this is kind of like a put up or shut up time for you too, because you've been in the organization for a while. And if you don't start making progress, that's usually when they finally cut ties with you and let you go, because they're not going to bring you up to the major leagues and whatnot like that either, because you've already been in the organization that long. They're basically trying to give you another extended look to get up in there. But there is some talent there. Like that Wenzel Perez kid is good. Andre Lipsius, like I said, Dan Hasty said a lot about that.
Look up some stuff on Brendan White. He's another relief pitcher that got pulled into the 40-man as well. He's got some pretty nasty stuff too.
Him and Wilmer Flores could be
yeah,
something.
him He had some good stuff in Erie. Look at some of his highlights. It's pretty good.
So now that we know what the current, I guess we'll loosely use the term 40 man looks like, and we know who is at least potentially on the roster for next year because they're on the 40 man, it doesn't mean they're going to stay a Tiger come spring training time. People could get released, people could get cut. But I think one thing we can take away from looking at these non-tenders is that Harris is really cleaning house and Harris is really trying to build depth. So looking forward on this roster, what do you think is going to be the first Tigers position will go after, in your opinion, for free agency?
Catcher.
You think so, even with Haas?
I think catcher. I don't think they believe enough in Jake Rogers. Personally, they've already been linked to Wilson Contreras, and you really haven't seen that much out of Jake Rogers yet to really say you're going to be definitive backup. I think there's still too much of a glaring hole there, and it doesn't really hurt to add catching depth. I mean, why not? And I think it could really help the team. Personally, I mean, he could play DH too.
Now, what I'm wondering is, Dylan Dingler has been hurt the last year and a half. When 2 years ago, when Torkelson, Green, and Dingler were all in Erie together, they were all rising through the system pretty fast. Dingler got hurt, and he really got stuck in Double-A all last year because he's been hurt all the whole time. I just don't know if he's made enough progress for the Tigers to even think about including him potentially in a 40-man roster spot or even looking to give him a chance toward the big leagues. I think he'd really have to overperform in Double-A again to give him a shot. My only thing is last year Eric Haas really struggled early on in the season. And a lot of that had to do was, in my opinion, that AJ Hinch did not play Eric Haas enough. There was such a stigma around Tucker Barnhart for being this amazingly good defensive catcher and all this other bullshit that I think Eric Haas's playing time got severely affected by that because they were trying to put the better guy defensively behind there because they're trying to shore up the defense. I just really hope if they were to go get someone like Wilson Contreras, that Contreras is going to want to play almost every day, that it wouldn't fuck Haas over to where Haas gets into a huge slump and then you don't see him do anything till June like he did this year. Because when you look from June on, and especially August on, Haas played so much better. And a lot of that had to do with this AJ Hinch was putting him and Barnhart in almost on an everyday rotation, unless Haas really was killing it like he was in August and September. And I don't know if Harris, if he's putting this emphasis on depth and quality, and I know he's definitely trying to improve the defense, I don't know if Harris would want to put him out in left field and give him that spot, and you're still going to have Miguel Cabrera DHing this year. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think the two obviously main holes right now are catcher and third base. So it's just a guess. They've only been linked to a catcher so far. So that's why I'm saying that came up at the GM meetings. So and Jamer wasn't tendered yet because we didn't know. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying catcher. But now you have that glaring hole at 3B. So I could be wrong.
So let me tell you about this. Now tell me if I'm thinking out loud crazy. Say they don't go after a third baseman, they go after someone to potentially play second and put Schoop at third for now. That could potentially work because Schoop has played some third base. I know how good defensively Schoop is there, but if you could get someone that hits a lot better than Schoop does, and put Schoop at third and put someone who could hits better than Schoop at second, you could live with someone potentially not having the same kind of defensive ability. Because let's be honest, Schoop was as good as it got at second base. He didn't win a Gold Glove, but he was as good as it got at second base. But you can't give someone of Schoop's caliber hitting this year another 140 games to fuck it up.
And that's not going to happen again because he's going to be really underneath the microscope. I don't care what kind of good defense he plays because clearly Scott Harris is showing he doesn't care. He's not playing right now. He's already said like that same offensive season cannot happen again this year. They can't. He said that in his GM meetings interview that they've had like five of the worst. They led five of the worst statistical categories in all of baseball offensively. Like they were like bottom of the league, and he's bound and determined not to let that happen again. So, but he did say it's not going to happen overnight, which he's right. But I just think Schoop's really under the microscope this year, personally.
My point is, I don't think if the Tigers got someone potentially better to play second base who could provide a better bat, what I'm saying is I think there's only two people in that entire infield that are guaranteed a spot at their position not being potentially rotated. And that is Javi Baez and Spencer Torkelson. And Torkelson right now, I love Torkelson. You love Torkelson. We both know our man crushes on him. But I think Harris isn't going to be afraid to send his ass down to AAA again if he struggles, you know? And I think right now, really the only guaranteed person in the whole infield is Javi Baez, and that's because of his contract. So if the Tigers were able to improve at second and have to move Scope to third, I think it's a possibility. I don't think they're going to look only at one spot and guarantee Scope an everyday spot because the bat they're trying to upgrade is at second, and they have to move Scope to third. I think it's going to have to be, shit or get out the pot. And don't forget, they still have if Ryan Kreidler makes the team, they still have Ryan Kreidler, who is way better than Harold Castro and Willie Castro was in the infield. Kreidler can play short, and you've seen him at third last year. He was absolutely a stud at third, and he could play second as well, and they put him at second. So I think if the Tigers were going to go out and get they need an infielder. But I don't think they're only going to look at third. I think they might look at a potential second baseman and maybe flip-flop Scope and have him play third, second, and then use Kreidler as the super utility guy this year because how good his glove is. Because Harold and Willie, neither one of their gloves were as good as Kreidler. You agree?
I agree. Yeah, they can't even touch Kreidler.
So
really, I don't even think Baez, well, besides the range, but Kreidler's more accurate.
So I think that was another big reason why they didn't tender Willie or Harold, because I think they know that Kreidler's bat didn't really show last year when his opportunity was in the big leagues. Kreidler really struggled. But if you look at Kreidler's previous year in AAA, the year that him, Torque, and Green were together, Ryan Kreidler was the best of the three at AAA that year. He had the best of the three overall numbers in that 2021 season. And then last year, he was hurt all year. And then when he finally got called up to the big leagues in September, as a September call-up, Kreidler, he had missed so much time. He started off like a tank at AAA, got hurt, came back, got hurt again, was down an A-ball for forever. And when he came up from Toledo, he was only in Toledo for a couple of weeks after he came back from A-ball. And all of a sudden, he's at the best league in the world. So I don't want someone to go ahead and look at Ryan Kreidler's year last year and think that this is his ceiling after a month. When he had hit in AAA some the year before in 2021. And I think that's a big reason why Harold and Willie didn't get a contract tendered to them, because of the fact of how much better defensively Ryan Kreidler is with every position that he had played in the infield, third, short, second. He easily ellipses all them. And I bet you, if need be, he could probably play first, too, if they needed him to play first. So I think Ryan Kreidler might be looked upon as the new super utility guy. Now, looking at the outfield, I think it's inevitable the Tigers have to go out and get an outfielder, right?
Yeah, 100%. They're looking for a right-handed power bat in the outfield, or just a right-handed hitter for the outfield. So now that there was a big trade, yesterday I think it was, Teoscar Hernandez went to Seattle. So that pretty much probably means the end of the Mitch Haniger experience there. So he's out there. Need a right-handed power bat in the outfield. But my only thing with him is the injuries. So can he stay healthy?
I think what the Tigers kind of have an ace in the hole right now with their roster. And that ace in the hole is Austin Meadows. I'm giving Austin Meadows this year to show everyone that Austin Meadows is a good player. He's not even 30 yet. He had one of the most freak injury years of all time last year. I mean, you look at Meadows, when he played those first couple weeks, he was one of the Tigers' best hitters. He didn't hit a home run, but you look at his doubles, he had a couple of triples. Meadows got out of the gate really strong. He comes out, he has vertigo, comes back, and then he hurts his Achilles. Then he has COVID, and then Riley Greene comes up. Then he I'm fucking this up. He had vertigo, COVID, then he hurts his Achilles and never comes back. He had the most freak after freak injury this past year. And I think the Tigers have a true ace in the hole. Now, Meadows defensively isn't anything to write home about. But offensively, you're looking at a guy that was, what did he finish? Like top 10 of the MVP one time with Tampa Bay? What was it, in 2019?
2019, yeah.
He's a former All-Star. There is talent in this bat. And we got 35 games to see this. If Austin Meadows comes back and he's Austin Meadows, he hits 25 home runs. If he hits 20 home runs and hits 265, that is an amazing addition to a Tigers lineup that was as bad as it's been since pre-World War One. This was the worst Tigers offense since 1904, before fucking Babe Ruth was even in the league. That is how bad this Tigers offense was last year. And when you have someone like Austin Meadows sitting with your ace in the hole like that, and you didn't get a chance to see him at all last year, that is low key like a really good like free agent sign that you have there. But I think coming into the season, they have three glaring holes. They need an infielder that's either going to be second or third base. They definitely need another outfielder out there that is going to give them some kind of offense. They can't just keep relying on Akil Baddoo. Riley Green is a second-year dude. You can't expect a guy who's going to be 22 next year to carry your whole fucking thing, your whole team. Spencer Torkelson had such a bad first year. You got to hope he bounces back and he's not Jared Kelenic. You need someone out there that's going to put up some offense, because you can't have another offense like it was last year. So they have to get something. But I think if Austin Meadows comes back healthy next year and he looks even remotely like 2019 or even 2021 Austin Meadows, that is huge. But they absolutely have to go out there and get some kind of an outfielder and another starting pitcher. My biggest three things: infielder, starting pitcher, and an outfielder. And they have to get at least 2 of 3 of those if they're going to be any bit successful next year. And by successful, I mean more than 75 wins. Because right now, if you look at this roster as it sits, they're like what? At max 72 wins.
If you're lucky right now. But a lot of people, I talked to you about this the other night. There's a lot of negativity still swirling around the team, and people, that were really hard on Avila, which I understand, are still like spewing their negative BS, and it drives me nuts because it's like change is happening, and it's like people will never just be happy. Can't make them happy no matter how you do it. So people are already saying they're going to run a AAA team out there next year, but it's like at least let the winter meetings happen before you make your assumptions and the free agency pass. So it's the thing that bugs me. It's like he wants to make a team for players that want to come to Detroit and make it like where he said he wants them to get better too, even though they're a big leaguer. He wants them to not just be here, but also help them develop still, and be a productive big league player for a long time. And it's like, you're telling me that some of these players don't look at like the environment or the comments or the stuff around the team. It's not all about dollar signs too. It's the vibe. So I think people just need to tone it down and just let the winter meetings happen, and enough with the crap, because it drives me nuts.
So I think putting a pretty bow on all this.
Hang on, I'm not done yet. Hold up. But I mean, do they have the right to be angry? Sure. I mean, the last 6 years have been terrible.
They fucking suck dick. Last year,
yeah, I don't blame anyone for being angry, but you should be happy that change has finally been happening and is happening. So there's something to be positive about. Stuff is coming. It's just, we got to get to the winter meetings and see what happens first before we make any assumptions. That's all. And like I was telling you the other day, JV's coming home. He's coming home.
Verlander's not coming fucking back.
I literally say this just to piss him off.
Listen, any Tiger fans watching my this video down the line 3 months from now, the Tigers fucking suck, and they're not going to be amazingly good next year. They're not going to give a guy who's fucking 40 a 3-year deal at $43 million, so they go from winning 65 games to 68. It's not fucking happening. I fucking hate to break it.
There's been a lot of comments on him and like Aaron Judge, and I'm like, these people are like, they just don't get it. Like, they're not in the place to make those moves anyway. Doesn't even make any sense.
If they were a fringe wildcard team last year and they won like 84 games, I could see it. But they didn't. They won 65 and they scored less runs than a fucking Little League team. Okay, they're not signing Justin Verlander. So before you get my blood boiling anymore with that dumb shit, to put a pretty bow on all this, I guess the general consensus of all this is Harris didn't give a shit about your time on the roster. They're really trying to improve overall depth of the team, by getting rid of Harold, Willie, Jamer. It didn't matter. If you weren't good and you weren't going to be good based off of time and his evaluation, you were gone. So looking at all this, They're really trying to improve the depth of the roster. They didn't care how long you were on the roster. They're trying to make every position count. And going forward from here on out, the rest of the offseason, it's looking like they definitely need infield help, catcher, either second or third baseman, and they need an outfielder and a starting pitcher. So I think definite more moves on the horizon. And like you said, I think it's going to be a winter meetings kind of thing. Maybe Harris will surprise with a big trade. I don't know. I mean, a lot of those guys on the 40-man roster, to me, are expendable. I don't think the Tigers should prospect hug. I think they've waited long enough to do this Avila rebuild and they prospect hugged and didn't. And, you know, a lot of their guys are hurt now, especially all the big pitchers.
Well, you got to think too, how much pressure does Scott Harris have on him this offseason to produce some? This is his first season as baseball operations for a team that is really hurt for the desire to win. So, but he's definitely coming into a better position than Avila did after Dombrowski left. There's a lot more prospects he could move, for sure, to make the team better. And he already said in that video that I watched, he said that they've gotten a bunch of calls on players already, which I would believe because, as I've said on here before, the Tigers do have talent in their minor league system. Just because they're ranked so low, there's other players other than Torkelson and Green, that exist down there. So.
And I think it could be better this year because they have a lot of guys down there, and we're not going to get into this wormhole, but they have a lot of guys down there that are super young, like 18, 17 years old, 19, that after one more season in like the lower minors, they could be easier, higher, like way closer to top 100 prospects than they are right now.
One guy to look for at this winter meetings or whatever. One guy I think they might move is possibly Colt Keith. Yeah. Just a guess.
He ripped it up in AFL.
That kid, even like watching interviews from Brian Pena from the Whitecaps or whatever, like they said he tears it up and his work ethic's good. He produces with the bat. I think he could be moved. I think he could be one of the pieces that could possibly be moved.
So this doesn't run forever. Tigers don't tender. Harold, Willie, Jamer, those are the big guys. Kyle Funkhauser. Harris isn't fucking around. They're cleaning up house, and we'll see what happens. They have some definite holes on this roster. They got space on the 40-man, and we'll see who they move. So that's all I got for you guys today. For my brother Chris.
I think one quick point. I don't think Harris is going to be as much of a prospect hugger as Avila. That's just my whole point with the Colt Keith thing. I don't think he's going to care how well they produce. He's just going to try to make the team better any way possible. That's my opinion. And hopefully we have a new GM within the next week or so before the winter meetings, which I think is going to –
baby. If we're getting anyone from Houston, let's get James Click.
I think it's got to happen before the winter meetings because everyone has to be in full sync of what the plan is forward. So it'd be weird to hire someone during. It's going to probably come here soon.
Yep.
That's all I got to say.
All right, guys. Have a good one. We'll be back soon if the Tigers make any moves. Later, guys.
Later.